Hi. So today for my presentation, I wanted to speak about Hamilton and how that has kind of propelled racial diversity within fields in our country. So the first thing I want to start with is what is Hamilton and what do they do? So Hamilton is a Broadway musical written by Lin-Manuel Miranda, and he created representation for minorities and people of color in America in order to encourage them to invade predominantly white fields of work and create that same representation they saw on the Broadway stage. Now, how did he do this? In America, there has been different perspectives on race and how race is treated in our country. Minorities have always struggled to gain representation in their field. We have seen this within, predominantly Black and minority neighborhoods such as Chicago, New York City, Manhattan. Doctors in those cities are predominantly white, even though the population is primarily non-white people of color. So we see those very prevalent, those racial barriers all around our country. Another example is Congress in 2020 is the most diverse House and Senate since the founding of America. Barack Obama was the first Black president in our country's history in 2012, which was 236 years of our country's founding. There was never a Black president until just recently, which is baffling. 22% of Congress are racial minorities, and 78% of members are white. This being the most diverse House, 22% is not a lot at all. That is basically 1 in 5 people are racial minorities, which does not represent our country's population and racial diversity. I actually included this chart from Pew Research Center where I got the information about 22% of Congress being non-white. You can see right here the 116th Congress. This is 22% of the Congress. 56 people are Black, 43 Hispanic, 17 Asian, and 4 Native American. Now I wanted to include this because this is very telling, especially the 4 Native Americans who are representing our country's Native American population. There are a lot of Native Americans and different tribes and groups and cultures and religions. Those 4 people cannot represent them all, which I found extremely, extremely discouraging when seeing who is represented in Congress and who is not. So how does Hamilton contribute to race in America? So the story of Alexander Hamilton, he was our first national treasurer. He was a white man and he was an immigrant, which is actually mentioned in the show. And the other founding fathers were also white men. The original cast and the script was written and specifically casted to be portrayed by all 9 non-white minorities. This means that there was not a single white person on that stage. Every single cast member had a background of different racial, cultural differences and religions and all a story that was included by white men or being told by people that are non-white and that did not have the same experience as them. David Diggs, who was the original cast member playing Marquis de Lafayette, stated, "Seeing people of color claiming and identifying with a story they have long been excluded from is important and makes history an inclusive narrative all people can be part of." I found this extremely, extremely interesting critique of Hamilton. It was published by Boston University. It was called All Hammed Up by Kylie Umahira. She included this specific quote, and I thought it was interesting because a story being told by people of color about people who were white changes the whole perspective, and like David said, includes them in history that they were specifically excluded from, which is the story of our country and how it was founded. So, why does this matter? I read a great critique on, Hamilton and how he approached slavery. Crooked Histories by Heather Nathans. She stated, Miranda laces his retelling of the Revolution's history with pointed comments about America's slave past, including Hamilton's intersections with the slave trade in Nevis, with sly allusions to Sally Hemings, and with insults hurled at Thomas Jefferson in the song Cabinet Battle 1, when Hamilton reminds Jefferson, your debts are paid because you don't pay for labor. Now, I strongly believe that if there was another musical written by a white man that told the history of Hamilton and the founding fathers that all of us see growing up in our history classes, slavery and, the affair Hamilton had with slave Sally Hemings is never, ever, ever included. The slave trade and the slave trade that Hamilton and Jefferson were both included in, which includes all of the other white founding fathers, was never ever written in history books. I believe that having people of color rewrite history and tell it from their perspective as people of color, that perspective changes. And that is extremely, extremely important. So, to kind of wrap it all up, when minorities are represented in mainstream media such as Hamilton, they are more likely to invade white majority fields and demand the representation they saw on a national playing field such as Broadway. This show created so many more opportunities for people of color in the acting world, in the theater arts, in Broadway, and it encouraged them to really go out into the world and create opportunities for themselves, such as the ones they saw in Hamilton. This final page is all my references, and thank you so much for listening.